for us to see the meaning of life. The first thing is we must have the ability to see. Then the ability to understand the issue, observe the issue sharply, and identify the issue deeply. To observe and identify, you must be a bright light. If we're just a dim light, how can we observe? So our wisdom must be bright. There's no other way. I don't know what you all do or where you go, but if we don't see the issue clearly, then we'll never find the meaning of life. We must see very brightly and deeply. Luckily, there's a way to cultivate it, to attain this issue. So the right vision is true wisdom for that reason. Without the light of wisdom, we will be completely mistaken and confused. You may become a kind person, but without the guiding light, that kindness may lead to evil. It's normal that a good person can turn bad after 5 years, because they confuse this and that. Just one mistake can lead to evil. To get this light, the first thing is we must practice thinking. With criticism, that is, practice seeing it from multiple angles. If someone says one side and we immediately believe, that's superstition. Totally believing is naive. They say this side. We should look at the other dimensions. They say one side. We look at the remaining 3 sides, don't we? This book of ours has 4 sides. A rectangle has 4 sides. They mention one side. Where are the other 3 sides? You notice. In business, especially when you go shopping, if some lady closes the sale, when closing, they usually mention all the sides, or they only mention 1 or 2 advantageous sides of the product. They only emphasize 1 or 2 advantageous sides, while ignoring the disadvantages. And when we buy the product and use it, we discover the remaining sides. Then it's too late. We bought it, no returns, end of story. So our way of seeing. We practice multidimensional viewing, practicing criticizing what we're learning. So 2,600 years ago, an enlightened master said this. That is, don't believe due to oral tradition, don't believe because it's tradition, and don't believe due to rumors. So we're sitting here. We have the right not to believe this curriculum. We're sitting here. We have the right to doubt what we're listening to. But there are 2 types of doubt. What do we doubt for? What do we doubt for? We doubt to understand issues deeply, not to distance ourselves from each other. In life, doubting distances us. Try it and see if it's right or not. The husband comes home late, you all doubt him. For what? Is it doubting to make the relationship quickly crack, leading to arguing? In meetings, we doubt because of jealousy, because we see the other person reporting, and we doubt them. Criticize to assert our ego, wanting to override the other's ego. It's not that. We doubt, criticize from the perspective of building together. So this don't believe advice encourages us to investigate, to illuminate the issue. Meaning, when they mention one side, don't quickly believe. We don't need to deny them. We just need to not quickly believe. We should observe more the remaining sides until it has all 4 sides. Then we synthesize it. That's when we should believe. So why did the Buddha's ancient scriptures have the story of the blind men and the elephant? Didn't the first person see the elephant as like a pillar? Because they felt its leg. The second person said the elephant was like a fan, feeling its ear. The third person said it was like a snake, feeling its trunk. Another said it was just like a boat, feeling its belly. So they kept arguing because each saw just one side. Our task is not to argue with anyone. We just listen, but don't believe quickly. We listen deeply, observe sharply. Later, we synthesize it to get an overall view. This path of belief, that's what it means. Not that we base it on where you went, who you played with, why you went drinking. Those are questions full of jealousy. Inner jealousy. The more we ask, the more we doubt. That relationship will crack faster. Notice this. So today, everything written in the materials that you have issues with, take a pen and write it down. Whenever free, just raise your hand and ask. Some answers will come the next day, or in the adjacent slides. In some cases I'll answer right away, along with you all. Now let's look back at the word doubt, meaning don't believe. Then there's a big don't believe here. What causes addiction? That question sounds really stupid. Who doesn't know? Heroin causes heroin addiction. It's like this. If you use heroin for 20 days, then on the 21st day, your body will crave the drug terribly, because the addictive components in the drug. That's what addiction means. However, there's a bit of a problem. Almost everything we know about addiction is wrong. Suppose you broke your hip and were taken to the hospital and given diamorphine for many weeks. Even for many months, diamorphine is heroin. It's even stronger than any street version. Addicts can find it on the streets because it doesn't contain impurities dealers mix in. Countless people are being given high-quality heroin in hospitals right now. If so, some of them must become addicts, right? But through careful studies, that phenomenon doesn't happen at all. Your grandmother didn't get addicted, even after hip replacement surgery. Why is that? Our current hypothesis about addiction came from a series of experiments conducted in the early 20th century. The experiments were quite simple. Take a rat and put it in a cage with 2 water bottles, one bottle containing plain water and the other containing water laced with heroin or cocaine. Almost every time they ran this experiment, the rat would become obsessed with the drugged water and keep coming back for more until it killed itself. But in the 1970s, Bruce Alexander, a psychology professor, noticed something odd about this experiment. The rat is put in the cage all alone. It has nothing to do but take the drugs. He wondered, would things be different if we tried this differently? So Professor Alexander built Rat Park. It was a rat paradise, a luxurious cage where the rats would have colored balls and the best rat food and tunnels to scamper down, and plenty of friends to play with. They also placed a drugged water bottle and a plain water bottle. But here's the fascinating thing, in Rat Park, the rats hardly touched the drugged water. None of them overdosed. But does this experiment only work with rats? Fortunately, there's also a similar experiment with humans. It's the Vietnam War. 20% of American troops in Vietnam were using heroin. The people back home were terrified. They believed that hundreds of thousands of addicted veterans would soon be returning. But when the war ended and the soldiers came home, the studies continued to follow the soldiers home, and they found some astonishing things. They didn't go through withdrawal and didn't even crave the drugs. 95% simply stopped using once they got back home. If you believe the old hypothesis about addiction, then this makes no sense at all. But with Professor Alexander's hypothesis, this makes perfect sense. Because if you're taken to a horrific jungle, in a distant country, against your will, forced to kill or be killed at any moment, using heroin is a great way to pass the time. But when you return to your friends and family, it's like escaping from that cage and being placed in a human version of Rat Park. The issue isn't the chemical hook, it's the environment. We need to look at addiction differently. Human beings have an innate need for connection. When we're happy and healthy, we bond with those around us. But when we can't due to trauma, isolation, or failures in life, we bond to things that give us a sense of relief. It could be constantly checking your phone. It could be pornography, video games, gambling, or even Pokemon. We've got to bond with something, because that's our human nature. The way out of unhealthy bonds is to form healthy ones. Connect with the people you want to be present with. Addiction is simply a million pieces of evidence of the disconnection that's happening all around us. We all sense it. Since the 1950s, the average number of close friends for an American has been steadily declining. At the same time, the square footage of their homes has been increasing, choosing bigger houses over friends, replacing relationships with material possessions. The war on drugs, that we've been fighting for nearly a century now, has made everything worse. Instead of helping people recover and stabilize their lives, we push them to the fringes of society. We make it harder for them to find jobs and get their lives back on track. We take away their welfare and support if we catch them using drugs. We throw them in jail, literally a cage. We put people who are unwell into situations that make them feel even worse and resent them for not recovering. On an impossible timeline, we've only been talking about individual recovery from addiction, but now we need to talk about social recovery. Because, as a society, we've gotten it all wrong. We need to build a society that looks more like a park and less like cages of isolation. We need to change our way of living naturally and rediscover each other. The opposite of addiction is not moderation. The opposite of addiction is connection.